Alright, so now we're moving on to some of the socialist thinkers of the A-level government and political ideas unit. We are going to do the bulk of the socialist philosophers in like one chunk because I have them all prepared already. We will do Jean-Jacques Rousseau and I believe Anthony Giddens at a later date, but today we're going to be going over Rosa Luxemburg, who lived between 1871 and 1919. And to those who do not know, she was a German Marxist. So, Rosa Luxemburg and Revolutionary Socialism. Rosa Luxemburg adapted the ideas of socialism proposed by Karl Marx into a coherent German philosophy. Luxemburg published her book Reform or Revolution in 1900. Luxemburg accepted the Marxian argument that capitalism promoted exploitation of the worker at the hands of the bourgeoisie, so the working class at the hands of pretty much the middle class. We won't get into the definitions of proletariat and bourgeois in the Marxian sense. We'll do that when we go into Karl Marx and talk about Das Kapital. So they're exploited due to the profit motive. Pretty much that's the Marxist belief anyway. She believed that capitalism was fundamentally at odds with humanity's natural fraternal instincts. The above beliefs are traditional a priori assumptions, so rationalistic assertions about the nature of reality, about human nature made by socialists, which originate in the works of Rousseau and the suppositions about human nature he proposes in A Discourse into the Origin of the Inequality that Exists amongst Mankind. And I know what you're thinking, that's a very long title. She concluded that evolutionary socialism was impossible and revolutionary socialism was the only way to implement real change. She rejected the notion of Marxian historicism, or the historical dialectic, which proposed that capitalism must reach an advanced stage before a socialist revolution can occur. However, her approach to revolution would differ to the opinions of Marx and Lenin. Luxemburg and the state after her revolution. Luxemburg did not support the Leninist notion of a vanguard socialist state, which stipulated that the revolution must be led by a small group of elite intellectuals. So they would be the socialist vanguard, who are supposed to look after the state and make sure it's behaving in the way the socialists want it to until it withers away. But obviously, as we know, it never does. Instead, she believed that a revolution could occur spontaneously, following an awakening in the class consciousness of the proletariat. So essentially, they believed that the collective working class, or in the Marxian sense, those who do not own the means of production, will just suddenly gain a class consciousness and a sense of common unity as they attempt to overthrow the supposedly oppressive bourgeoisie. She believed that the awakening of a proletarian class consciousness would start with mass strikes and end with a full revolution and the overthrow of the capitalist state. Although she was a revolutionary socialist, she denounced the notion of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and she instead advocated for the creation of a new democracy, which was underpinned by the principles of common ownership, open debate, and transparent elections. Seems fairly similar to the Weimar Republic there, but I digress. Luxemburg and her globalist sympathies. There are a plethora of ways in which Luxemburg was a Marxist zealot. For instance, she supported the notion of Marxian internationalism, so she believed in a global form of socialism, which was not constrained by national identity. She famously stated that a socialist revolution should not be considered endemic to a particular nation, and she instead proposed that the revolution should be a global phenomenon. So essentially she doesn't really believe in the way that the Russians did it, where they made communism integral to their national identity. She believes it's more of a global thing, and she believes it would be more beneficial to the communists to shirk off any kind of national identity so they can gain more power in other countries with other communist revolutions. For example, the one in China or Afghanistan. Obviously, Afghanistan failed, though. So, this belief may have been responsible for the Spartacist uprising of 1919 in Germany, which occurred just 2 weeks after the revolution. Just 2 years after the revolution in Russia. Her anti-nationalist beliefs came to surface throughout the duration of the Great War, as she detested the war and was disgusted with the support for the war given by the SPD, so obviously the Socialist Party of Germany. As a result, she left the SPD and started the KPD in 1918. So she went from the Socialist Party and created her own Communist Party. She concluded that the Great War would result in the awakening of a proletarian class consciousness and ultimately lead to a socialist revolution. Why was she unpopular with other socialists? Most socialists and communists of the early 20th century did not support Luxemburg's view that the KPD should participate in the Weimar Republic by standing for election. Obviously, like you probably remember, it was seen kind of disgraceful to participate in this kind of democracy by the radical fringe. So the National Socialist Party, I believe there's a quote from Hitler saying that he would have to hold his nose and enter the Reichstag. Because obviously he's trying to say that it smells of corruption. She was denounced because by Marxists because they believed she defiled the principles of evolutionary socialism by working with the oppressive capitalist state, and thus providing it with a sense of legitimacy. Rosa Luxemburg was shot by the police in 1919 following the Spartacist uprising and the victory of the Freikorps over the Communists. She was executed with Karl Liebknecht, the other founder of the KPD. So, that pretty much sums it up for Rosa Luxemburg and her contributions to 20th century socialism and communism. As you likely know, the words can be used interchangeably. Well, they could be for most of the 20th century. Most people draw a distinction between the two nowadays, but it's based on interpretation. So this isn't really specific to Rosa Luxemburg, but I think these are the key terms that I would recommend you note down with regards to socialism. So we're going to be using them throughout some of our other socialist thinkers, and I just think it's important that you know what they are in case you haven't already read a lot of these books. So, class consciousness essentially means a feeling of unity within a particular class. The vanguard elite are an oligarchy of intellectuals whom run the socialist state, most popular and pervasive with Marxist-Leninism. Evolutionary socialism, so a state becoming socialist gradually without revolution. Revolutionary socialism, self-explanatory. Historicism, the idea that after capitalism is formed, socialism is an inevitability. Obviously, that's an oversimplification of historicism, but we can't go much deeper into it at the moment. Dictatorship of the proletariat having power over the bourgeoisie. Common ownership, no individual can own property and it belongs to the collective. Marxist internationalism, the belief that borders are a form of oppression. Socialist nationalism, a form of patriotism that supersedes nationality. And the heretical compromise, replacing God with the state. And since we've got a bit of time left, I think I'll just clarify the difference between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, coming from Karl Marx in his book Das Kapital. Essentially, it can be summed up as the proletariat are those whom do not own the means of production, whereas the bourgeoisie are those whom own the means of production. So if we're going to be thinking about Ben Shapiro's pencil factory analogy, the bourgeoisie owner would be the man who owns the pencil making machines, and the proletariat would be the man who works on those machines, giving only his labour. He's not invested in the machine itself. So that's it for this lesson, mainly focusing on Rosa Luxemburg. Thank you.